find the defendant, Kyle H. Rittenhouse, not guilty.
We, the jury, find the defendant, Daniela Redlick, not guilty of...
Get ready to witness some of the most intense and gut-wrenching reactions of convicts found not guilty by court. Number 1. Mateo Moore. A full acquittal is a sigh of relief for any person charged with a crime they did not commit. But after fighting their cases for years, the final moment of exoneration becomes a highly emotional one. Mateo Moore's was no different, as he broke down in front of the judge, unable to control his emotions. Moore was charged and tried in the murder of his wife, Emily Noble, whose body was found in September 2020, shortly after her birthday in Westerville, Ohio. Emily Noble was found in the wooded Westerville area with a 20-inch USB cord around her neck. Months after being reported missing in May, she had suffered several fractures and died from multiple injuries to the head and neck. When her body was discovered, the death looked like a suicide, but investigators soon uncovered the truth and revealed it was a homicide. During the trial, several witnesses took to the stand, including Noble's sister, who said Moore became upset with her when she refused to become his spokesperson to the police. Despite the prosecutor's efforts to blame Moore entirely, they could not ascertain his direct involvement in the unfortunate incident. On the other hand, Moore's defense fought hard to prove that the case was based on mere speculation. Since Noble had struggled with depression before her death, therefore, hanging could not be ruled out of the equation. After deliberating for almost 3 hours, a Delaware County jury found Mateo Moore not guilty in the death of his 52-year-old wife Emily Noble. If you thought Moore's reaction was heart-wrenching, wait to see how our next high-profile convict received news of his acquittal. Number 2. Michael Barrison. It's time to move to New Jersey, where Michael Barrison, an Olympic rider and dressage coach, was accused of shooting his student, Lauren Kanarek, twice in the chest in August 2019 at his Long Valley Training Center and Farm. Kanarek had been living in an apartment on Barrison's farm with her fiancé as part of an arrangement. But when Barrison was forced to move out of his home after a flood, he had to move into a barn on the property. Barrison tried to evict Kanarek and Goodwin out of the apartment so he could live there, but they weren't willing to move, which triggered a feud that escalated with his presence on the property. Can you imagine why Barrison resorted to violence to get rid of Kanarek? Barrison claimed that Kanarek mentally abused him, pushing him toward a crime that would forever change his life. This story was further corroborated by the calls Barrison made to 911, claiming that the two were harassing him. The defense told the court that in the moments leading up to the shooting, Kanarek and her fiancé beat up Barrison and even had their dog attack him. This is where the story gets more interesting. Kanarek survived the shooting, but was placed in a medically induced coma and had extensive surgery to repair her left lung. However, when she recovered, Barrison's supporters on social media blamed her for the shooting, claiming that she deserved it. Considering the circumstances under which the fateful incident occurred, a jury in Morris County, New Jersey, found Barrison not guilty by reason of insanity. Following the acquittal, Barrison was transferred to a psychiatric hospital and has since been moved to a less restrictive facility. The prosecutors believed Barrison didn't deserve exoneration, but it's the next convict who was perhaps let off easy. Number 3. Daniela Redlick. Let's head to Florida, where a woman was accused of murdering her stepdad-turned-husband in their Winter Park home. This is Daniela Redlick, a 48-year-old who admitted to stabbing her husband in court, but in self-defense, she contended that she was scared for her life when she stabbed her husband and forced him to move away from her. But wait until you hear the other side of the story. Daniela's claim of self-defense was marred when prosecutors argued that Redlick tried to wipe the crime scene clean before calling 911. In addition, when she did call 911 the same morning, her husband died. She informed the authorities that she thought he died of a heart attack. However, a medical examination showed no signs of a heart attack. And what further weakened her case were the scene-responding officers witnessed upon reaching their home. There were blood-soaked towels and mops, including a 5-gallon bucket filled with pinkish water. There was also blood in the main bedroom shower. Redlick had been married to her husband for almost 15 years, and the pair had 2 children. Although Jaden demanded a no-contact order to protect her and her brother from their mother, it was rejected by the court. Daniela Redlick eventually dodged a conviction of second-degree murder in her husband's death, but received a year of probation for tampering with the crime scene. Do you think Daniela deserved to be acquitted? Speaking of dubious judgments, the next acquittal raised many questions about people's expectations of law enforcement agencies. Number 4. Scott Peterson. This is Scott Peterson, a school resource officer who failed to engage with the assailant during the February 2018 massacre at the Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School in Parkland. Peterson was accused of ignoring his training and doing nothing as 17 people, including 14 students, were shot mercilessly in what remains to be the deadliest US high school shooting ever. In his defense, Peterson's attorney insisted that the then deputy didn't enter the school's 1200 building where the attack occurred because he couldn't tell where the shots were coming from. A jury acquitted the former school resource officer on all 7 counts, including felony child neglect, culpable negligence, and perjury. The case was notable because prosecutors argued that Peterson had a duty to protect the students. In contrast, the defense maintained that he did not qualify as a caregiver since he was a law enforcement officer. Do you agree with the prosecutors or the defendants? The victims' families weren't very happy with the court's decision. It's hard to argue with the victims' parents, as Peterson took cover for more than 45 minutes outside the school's 3-story building before the killer was apprehended. The next convict couldn't control his tears as the jury read out a not guilty verdict. Number 5. Kyle Rittenhouse. Here's a trial that divided the nation over questions of gun rights, violence at racial justice protests, and vigilantism. The highly watched trial attempted to overcome Rittenhouse's claim that he acted in self-defense on the night of the shootings. Rittenhouse's life took an unexpected turn when he armed himself with an AR-15 style rifle in Kenosha on the night of Jacob Blake's shooting. Jacob was a 29-year-old black man left paralyzed following an encounter with a white police officer. Rittenhouse lived across the state line in Antioch and stated that he intended to carry the rifle that night to protect private property. However, considering that emotions were already running high following Blake's murder, the night quickly spiraled out of control. In the chaotic events that followed, Rittenhouse shot and killed 36-year-old Joseph Rosenbaum and 26-year-old Anthony Huber. He also injured a third man, 26-year-old Gage Grosskreutz. What do you think happened? Why did Rittenhouse kill the men? According to the defendant, Rittenhouse feared for his life in all 3 cases. Visual evidence also showed that Huber struck him with a skateboard and Grosskreutz held a loaded Glock pistol. However, the prosecutors argued that Rittenhouse himself created that situation by bringing a deadly weapon into a charged environment. They argued that one of his victims, Rosenbaum, wasn't even armed when Rittenhouse shot him 4 times. Grosskreutz also testified that he feared for his life because of Rittenhouse's rifle and only wanted to disarm, not kill him. Despite these testimonies, the prosecutors could not convince the jury, who acquitted Rittenhouse of all charges. Rittenhouse's release didn't thrill all audiences, but the same can't be said for the final convict on our list, whose acquittal triggered heartfelt applause across the courtroom. Number 6. Daniel Villegas. Meet Daniel Villegas, an innocent man who spent 23 years behind bars before the court found him not guilty in his 3rd trial. It was the year 1993, when Villegas' life changed forever. Then 16-year-old Villegas was a high school student living in El Paso, Texas. On the 10th of April, Armando Lazo, Bobby England, and 2 other men were walking home from a house party when a car pulled up slowly behind them. The boys didn't feel alarmed as the car quickly pulled away, but they did not know that it would turn around, head right in their direction, and open fire. Daniel Villegas was apprehended in the murders of Lazo and England, who lost their lives because of the shooting. His first trial in 1994 ended in a mistrial, but he was convicted by a jury of capital murder the following year and sentenced to life in prison. The 1995 conviction was overturned 18 years later by a court appeal in 2013, and a new trial began. Since there were dozens of appeals and decisions, Villegas' case became one of the highest-profile capital murder cases in El Paso, even before the court absolved him of all charges and declared him not guilty. Villegas was overcome with emotions considering the gravity of his situation. When the court finally announced the highly anticipated verdict, cheers and applause echoed in the courtroom as Villegas supporters rejoiced at his freedom. But the most heartwarming reaction was of Villegas himself, who cried uncontrollably at the prospect of a new and better life. If you thought these reactions were extraordinary, wait until you see how these young notorious killers reacted to their sentences in court.